Hey everyone, welcome to Youth Group. Tonight we're going to look at my favorite book in the Old Testament, maybe my favorite book in the whole Bible, and that is the book of Habakkuk. And along with Habakkuk, we're also going to revisit the theme of lament that Jeff talked about last week. So he talked about the Psalms, and one type of psalm is a psalm of lament. And he touched on that, so we're going to look at that again this week as we dig into Habakkuk. Habakkuk was a prophet in the southern kingdom, and he prophesied after the northern kingdom had been destroyed, before the southern kingdom was destroyed. So the southern kingdom is getting more and more evil, more and more sinful, and Habakkuk is living during that time. And Habakkuk's unique because the book of Habakkuk is not a prophet telling the people what God says. That never happens in the book of Habakkuk. Habakkuk is just a dialogue between God and Habakkuk. So it's just the two of them going back and forth. There's no sharing that with other people. So it's unique. It gives us a really cool insight into what goes on. But there's this theme in the book of Habakkuk of lament. And it's huge here. It's like really central to what's going on. And I just wanted to emphasize or point out a truth about lament. Jeff talked about lament, that it's an appropriate way to interact with God, to express your discontent with brokenness. And that's so good. But there's another thing about lament I just want you to know. I want you to remember. And that is that lament is grounded in faith. True lament is a faith exercise. It's a statement of faith, and let me explain what I mean by that. Lament is not just complaining about things that are sad or bad or broken. In order for you to lament, there has to be some belief that things should be different. If you didn't believe that God was completely in control, or if you didn't believe that God was loving and kind, then when bad things happened, it would make complete sense. There would be nothing to be disappointed in, because that's what you believe about the world, that God's not in control, and so bad things happen, or that God's not actually a good God, and so he lets bad things happen on purpose to spite us. If that's how you viewed God, if that's what you believed about God, then bad things would make complete sense. And you could be sad about them, but you couldn't complain about them. That's your worldview. That's just what you think happens. But if you truly believe that God is in control and that God is a loving and good God, then when bad things happen, now you have what appears to be a conflict. Now, this doesn't line up with what you said you would do, or who you said you are in your word. And that's where lament comes from. It comes from a place of fully believing that God's in control and that he's good, and then seeing a broken world that doesn't seem to line up with that, and bringing those things before God in faith, saying, hey, could you help me understand what in the world's going on here? This doesn't make sense with what I believe to be true about your character. So lament, in order for it to even exist, has to start with faith that God is in control and that God is good. So lament is a statement of faith. And so Habakkuk kind of enters into a lament, a faith-filled lament. So he's living in Judah. There's evil and sin and just a lot of really disgusting lifestyles around him. And he recognizes, man, this is not how it's supposed to be. Israel's supposed to look different than the world around them. They're supposed to be God's chosen people. God's been so faithful. God promised that this is the chosen people of God. It shouldn't look like this, and God shouldn't be tolerating this evil nation. And so he goes to God and he asks him, how long are you going to allow this evil? And so this is the first part of their dialogue, is Habakkuk's first question. And he says, how long are you going to allow this evil? This is Habakkuk chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. Here's what he says. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear? Or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity? Why do you idly look at wrong? And he just goes on and talks about how evil Judah is. And he's wondering, God, how long are you going to allow this evil? Doesn't make sense. And so God actually answers Habakkuk. We don't know how. We don't know if it was a voice in the sky or what. But God, his answer is recorded here in Habakkuk. And his answer is, hey, Habakkuk, don't worry. I see the evil in Judah. Don't worry. I'm going to send Babylon to destroy you. That's God's answer to the problem. This is in verse 6. It said, "For behold, I'm raising up the Chaldeans," that's Babylon, "that bitter and hasty nation who march through the breadth of the earth to seize dwellings not their own." And he just goes on in those verses to describe just how powerful the Babylonians are, and basically that Judah didn't stand a chance. And that's his answer. That's his solution that's coming to Habakkuk's big question. Hey, how long are you going to let this evil continue? Oh, hey, Habakkuk, don't worry. I'm going to destroy Judah. And so, obviously, Habakkuk has a lot more questions, right? I don't think he's satisfied with that answer. It's just raised a lot more questions. And so now Habakkuk responds back to God. He's like, hey, quick question. I hear what you're saying. How does that make any sense whatsoever? Because Babylon is far more evil than Judah. How would it make sense for you to use an eviler, is that a word? A more evil nation to destroy your chosen people? This is in verse 13, still chapter 1. "You who are of purer eyes than to see evil and cannot look at wrong, why do you idly look at traitors and remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he?" He doesn't understand how the answer to Judah's evil could be their destruction by someone more evil, which makes sense. Like, I don't think any of us would really understand that. And so he expresses this confusion to God. God says, hey, don't worry, I'm going to destroy you. And he's like, yeah, I don't understand that. Why would you allow that to happen? He just lays out his confusion and maybe even frustration with that answer. But in the middle of that, or right after he says that, he makes this really cool statement. He says, chapter 2, verse 1. He's responding to God, and then he says, "I will take my stand at my watchpost and station myself on the tower and look out to see what he will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint." This is so cool. He's just explained that he has no idea what God is doing. He doesn't like what God is doing, and yet he's confident that God is still the one who can answer him. He doesn't like what's going on, but he still believes that God's the only one who can provide a sufficient answer. And so God's the only one who he's putting his trust into. And so he's like, hey, here's my complaint, and I'm going to wait for an answer. I'm not looking somewhere else for an answer. I'm not going to go hire an army to fight the Babylonians. I'm going to wait for an answer. So in the middle of his confusion, there's trust. He trusts God even though he doesn't understand what God is doing. That's huge. If you're taking notes, that's huge. He trusts God even though he doesn't understand what God is doing. And he waits for a response, and God responds again. He answers Habakkuk again. So Habakkuk says, hey, how long are you going to allow this evil? God says, psh, don't worry, I'm going to destroy you. Habakkuk says, that doesn't make sense. How does that make sense? I'm going to wait for a response. And God says, okay, don't worry, I'm also going to destroy Babylon. That's God's second answer. This is chapter 2, verses 4 through 6. "Behold, his soul is puffed up. It is not upright within him, but the righteous shall live by his faith. Moreover, wine is a traitor, an arrogant man who is never at rest. His greed is wide as Sheol. His death, like death, he has never enough." He's talking about Babylon here. "He gathers for himself all nations and collects as his own all peoples. Shall not all these take up their taunt against him with scoffing and riddles for him and say, woe to him who heaps up what is not his own? For how long? putting a curse on Babylon, who's heaping up nations and destroying nations who are not his own. See, God is a just God. Nothing goes unpunished or unjustified, and Babylon, who's evil, is eventually going to get what's coming to them. Just not until after God uses them to destroy Judah. And that's his plan. He's going to use an evil nation, and then eventually that evil nation is going to be destroyed as well. And in this explanation, in the middle of this crazy plan that he has, there's this amazing verse that explains God's plan for missions for the whole world, somehow in the middle of this. This is Habakkuk 2:14. It says, "For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea." So, like right in the middle of this very isolated event where God's promising that Israel, Judah is going to be completely destroyed for their evil, and then Babylon's going to be destroyed, and it seems like there's really no future for anyone. Right in the middle of that, there's this nugget, this glimpse of the future, and we see that, man, God's already got the big picture in mind. He's already planning for the gospel to go to all nations. We are the benefactor of Habakkuk 2:14, the beginning of the fulfillment of Habakkuk 2:14. And so there's this glimpse that, man, maybe he is in control. We don't know what he's doing, but like there's something bigger going on here, and he's in control of what's going on. He's not just in control of Judah. He's not just in control of Babylon. He has a plan for the whole world. And that's what he says to Habakkuk. And so Habakkuk then responds one final time. The conclusion of the book, he responds to God. God says, hey, don't worry. I'm going to destroy Babylon too. And Habakkuk responds, he says, yeah, clearly I have no idea what you're doing. Clearly, like, I just cannot grasp what you're doing or why you would do it. But I'm going to trust you. I'm going to still put my faith in you. This is so huge. Habakkuk's kind of conclusion and response after everything he's just heard from God, everything he sees coming. He says, yeah, I don't get it. Don't get it. Don't understand it. I'm not going to try to figure out, justify why this is all happening. I don't understand it, but I'm still going to trust God. Habakkuk 3 verse 16. I hear and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters my bones. My legs tremble beneath me. Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon people who invade us. He's scared of what's coming. He knows that when Babylon comes, that's not going to be a quiet retreat where they just kind of all shuffle away to Babylon. It's going to be terrible. And he's scared of it, but then he has this ending statement, verses 17 through 19, which may be, it's some of my favorite verses in the Bible. It might be my favorite verse in the Bible. I think it speaks so much to who Habakkuk was, and I think it's so applicable for us, just right where we are today. Habakkuk chapter 3, verses 17 through 19. I hope you're looking at this in your own Bibles. Here's what it says. Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God the Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on high places. Man. After everything he's heard, hey, God, what's going on? Why are you allowing this to happen? Don't worry. I'm going to destroy you. That doesn't make sense. Oh, don't worry. I'm going to destroy Babylon too. Yeah, I don't get it. But no matter what happens, no matter how bad it gets, no matter how terrible everything goes, regardless of that, I'll trust you. I'll rejoice in the Lord. It's a powerful statement, and I think it's so applicable to where we are today, like seniors. Though I don't get to finish my senior year, though I don't get to have a commencement, and though I don't get to do all of the conclusions, and though freshman year of college is looking vague and up in the air just because of what we're allowed to do, though all of those things that I was planning on and looking forward to are kind of crumbling underneath their own weight right now, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God the Lord is my strength. Not my plan, not my friends. God the Lord is my strength. I'm sure most of you have heard of Elijah and his surgery, his back surgery coming up this week, a very serious surgery, and there's a lot of unknowns. And we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the outcome's going to be, and it's scary. Elijah, man, we're praying for you that you will rejoice in the Lord, that no matter what happens, you will take joy in the God of your salvation, and that God the Lord would be your strength. I want you to see this as we close out the book of Habakkuk. It began with a statement of faith, because it began with lament. And lament, as we talked about at the beginning, lament is grounded in faith. So any sort of lament, any true lament in the Bible is actually a statement of faith. And Habakkuk is a lament, and so it starts out with a statement of faith, and then it ends with this very powerful statement of faith that we just looked at. And so the bookends of this short 3-chapter book are really, really deep faith in who God is and what he's going to do. In between that is just a whole bunch of like discontentment with what's going on. God, why are you doing this? God, why are you doing that? Why would you allow this to happen? But what bookends that, what holds that up, is complete trust that God is in control, complete faith that God is trustworthy. And that's the book of Habakkuk. That's the whole thing. Just this really short exchange between God and this faithful, trusting prophet who has this complete reassurance that his God is in control, no matter what. Because when you have that type of a faith, you have that type of reassurance. And so I just want to present this book to you in this really uncertain season. Do you have that faith in God? Can you say what Habakkuk says, that, man, I don't get it, which is okay to say, by the way. Man, I don't get it. I've racked my brain. I just can't understand, God, why you would allow this to happen right now. That doesn't make sense. But I'll trust you. I'll trust that you're in control. I'm not going to try to understand it, because I'm not going to, but despite not understanding it, I'm going to trust that you're in control. I'm going to find joy, not just tolerate. I'm going to find joy in God. That's it. That's I think what we're called to. I think that's the application for Habakkuk. Thanks, guys. Have a great time with your small group. Have a great week.